For everybody else who doesn't feel like getting up right now, we have an amazing human right here who has done so much incredible work to help so many non-human animals. So we are very blessed to have with us today Pam Ahern, who is the founder and director of Edgar's Mission, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. Pam built the sanctuary from the ground up and set in motion outreach programs that would bring farmed animals out of the dark unknown and into the public view. She's done so much incredible work, and here she is right now. Please give a warm round of applause to Pam Ahern. There you go. Good luck, Pam.
Thank you, James. It is an absolute honour to be here today. But before I do start my talk, I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting here today on land that has been traditionally held by the Kaurna people. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Adelaide, I cannot thank you enough for the amazing welcome that you have given to me. It has been absolutely wonderful to be at the stall yesterday and today and to meet so many people who make Edgar's Mission happen on a daily basis. You are awesome. Thank you so incredibly much. What if? Have you ever said that to yourself? What if? It's a question I posed to my 5-year-old self many, many moons ago. The intrepid 5-year-old that I was told she was never allowed to have a pony of her very own. My folk were city folk, so my pleadings for a pony fell on deaf ears. They weren't particularly rich. We had a very small backyard. But my mother always said the worst thing you could say to Pam is you can't. And it wasn't because I was a belligerent child, I wanted to thumb my nose with authority or just prove someone wrong. In fact, I was a very quiet child. You very, very rarely heard a peep out of me. But I loved to challenge myself, as I challenge myself today, daily. So I said to myself, what if? So I grabbed my scooter. I took the wheels off my scooter and I grabbed a pair of my mum's pantyhose and I tied a tyre to each end. And that was my saddle. And I used to ride the kitchen stool around the house for hours on end. Clonkety clonk clonk. I think I drove my mum absolutely nuts of not having any pantyhose nor the noise I made. So that was where she took me down to the local pony club. And that was where my relationship with larger farmed animals really began. I grew beyond our family's 2 cats, Blackie and Tiny, and our lovable, goofy Labrador named Laddie. Laddie and I would spend hours in the backyards together playing. Dear Laddie occasionally mistook me for a tree, but that's okay. Friends do that. And I was fascinated by bees. I would spend hours watching bees buzz around and all those sorts of things. So I had smaller animals in my life, but it was when my mum took me down to the local pony club that I really began my relationship working with larger animals. I managed to achieve a dream of my pony and so much more beyond anything I could have ever thought possible. I became a very, very successful equestrian, travelling all around Australia, going to all sorts of agricultural fairs and expos. In fact, it was a bit of deja vu as I drove over the Adelaide hills on Friday, coming into South Australia. It was something that I did many, many years ago. Every year I would come over to your agricultural show down the road. But it was a different time. This time I wasn't actually in an agricultural organisation based on the exploitation of animals. I was here to champion the cause of animals, surrounded by people who too share my belief that animals deserve to simply be. But when I was going around to all those agricultural shows, I was always challenging myself because I remember someone told me very early in my career that, Pam, you're never ever going to be a successful equestrian because you're way too short. Well, they told me that I couldn't. I won the Gary On Trophy at the Melbourne show on 2 separate occasions, and that pretty much is the equivalent of the Melbourne Cup of the equestrian. Now, I don't say that as a bragging or an ego thing. I just, it's something that what you can achieve when you really set out to push yourself. It's a sport that was dominated by a lot of money, a lot of influence, a lot of politics. I had none of those things, but I had an incredible passion for horses, and I didn't realise at the time it was all almost a prerequisite to where I am today. I was learning so much about horses, learning to read animal behaviour. It paid you very early on to read how that horse was feeling, because you could either be kicked off, bitten, or bucked off. So I was learning all that time, reading animal behaviour, and I think that was a lot of my success with the horses, that I was never fortunate to be able to spend a lot of money and buy really expensive horses already trained. I had to do it all myself, and learning, most of the horses I had were very, very difficult, so that reading animal behaviour became something that was intrinsic in my nature, and it serves me so well today when I'm working with these farmed animals in terrible situations to try and read what that animal is feeling, developing that empathy for another living being and trying to see the world through their eyes. And it certainly serves me well, and I know it serves those animals that I seek to protect so well. And that on my trajectory to getting where I am today, I was always wanting to do something more. And I remember I saw a little ad in the paper, and it said you could send away for the list. It was a cruelty-free list about companies that aren't tested on animals. I'm sure many of you are familiar with them today, but way back in the 80s it was an A4 sheet of paper, and it would get updated all the time. And then one time when it was getting updated, it had a little ad in there for an anti-fur rally, and I thought, well, fur's really cruel. We don't really need to wear fur to clothe ourselves, so I'd like to go along to the rally. So I rang up and asked about the rally, and it was organised by Animal Liberation in Victoria, and I was a little bit nervous, and I said to the lady on the phone, hey, look, I'd really like to come along to the rally, but I eat meat. Is that okay for me to come along? What transpired next was, I think, what I believe the foundation is for my style of activism. Now, she could have said, meat is moron, meat is murder, you can't come along to the rally, you've got to be a vegan to come along to the rally. But she didn't. She was kind to me. She said, look, you're more than welcome to come along to the rally. I want you to think about what's on your plate and how it gets there. She encouraged me to think. She encouraged me to develop my own sets of values for what was true to me. And I think that's a foundation for why I do what I do, because I truly believe in the goodness of the human heart. And I'm going to talk about that more later. So I went along to the rally, proudly wearing my woolen skirt, leather shoes and leather belt. And I was listening to all the conversations that were buzzing around at the time, because I am a really, really shy person. That's why I wear a hat. And I was listening to these conversations buzzing around, and they were talking about this book called Animal Liberation. Everyone was talking about this book, Animal Liberation. And I was a little bit nervous about the book because my dad had warned me about the liberationists, that they're the terrorists, the communists, the wackos, the hippies, and they're going to ruin the world. But I had the word animal in front, so I was hooked. So I got a hold of the copy of the book, and it didn't take me long when I was reading into the book, and the author Peter Singer was talking about a time when he was in England, and he was taken to the local chapter of the RSPCA by some mutual friends. And they were talking about animals and how they could better the world for animals. And they're getting on really well. And then it came time for afternoon tea, and they served ham sandwiches. And he thought, well, that's odd. And I thought, well, that's right. And at that point, my life and my menu changed forever. I have to admit, though, I wasn't a very good vegan, because several months down the track, I ran into someone who was a vegan, and they told me I'd actually been pronouncing the word wrong. That's how isolated I was at the time. I couldn't even pronounce the word vegan. But thankfully today, thanks to a multi-million-dollar campaign by, of all people, the Meat and Livestock Corporation, everybody knows how to pronounce the word vegan. So thank you. We do have some things to thank them for. Now I can go to the local supermarket in my country town of Lancefield, population 1,204. Actually, it's only 1,203 because I'm here today, but anyway, there's not many people there. In my local supermarket in Lancefield, I can get oat milk, rice milk, macadamia milk, soy milk, all these different milks that aren't involving animals. I can get vegan ice cream, I can get vegetarian burgers that are actually vegan, and hopefully soon we might even get tofurkey there, so that'll be even more awesome. But when I started my journey, the only non-dairy milk you could get was this powder stuff. You mix it up with water, and it tasted absolutely disgusting. My mum and I raced out and bought tofu, and it too was disgusting. We ate it raw. Where was cooking with kindness when you needed it? But today we have so many stalls. So I look at all these stalls here today, all these different foods that we can have that don't involve animal products. It's so easy today to live our ethics and put that into action. So I really thank each and every one of you here today who are supporting these organisations, the companies that are making these products. You two are awesome, because you're reminding me that a kinder world is as close as the simple choices that we make. So now to tell you about how Edgar's mission came into being. I was working with Animals Australia on the campaign called Save Babe. It was highlighting our flawed animal protection legislation. You see, most people, I think like me, took great comfort that our society too cared deeply about animals. We've enshrined it in legislation. It's called the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. But as I was growing up, I actually came to learn, well, some animals were a little bit more equal than others. We treated animals not on their ability to suffer or how much they desired to be with their family and friends or how much they even cherished their life. We treat animals on the way that they look, on the shape they come in, our familiarity with them, and the intended use that we have of them. Nothing to do with the animal themselves. And I think that's to the detriment of not only animals, but we human beings as well. Because when we disregard the suffering of another living being, I truly believe that a part of our heart starts to shut down and we desensitise ourselves to the suffering of other living beings. And when I spread that to a wider meaning and I look at what's happening in the world today, it really is true. When we think about road rage and home invasion, even shootings, someone, somewhere in their life, has started to disregard the worth of another living being. And I think that happens so much in our life from the lessons we learn as children. The most innocent, less heard, I'm not going to say voices because animals certainly do have a voice, but the less heard among us are the animals. You know, the fact that we don't have the prevention of cruelty to rocks or the prevention of cruelty to microphones or tents or chairs because we know that they can't suffer. We know animals can suffer, we've enshrined in legislation, but our human selfishness has actually treated these animals, we allow them to be treated the way we do as commodities because we have these things called codes of practice. Now, in 2003, the Code of Practice for Pig Farming was up for review. This presented an enormous opportunity for the public to have input in the way these animals were treated. I think one of the things that makes Australia such a fantastic country, because I really love our country, it is awesome, is that our laws reflect public thought. They don't drive public thought. And I'll give you a little example of that. When I was growing up and my family would go for rides in the country, we never ever wore a seatbelt. And it wasn't because we were lazy or we were belligerent or we wanted to thumb our nose at the police. It wasn't the law to wear seatbelts when I was growing up. We'd hop in the car and go for rides. No one ever wore a seatbelt. But what we did have in our society at the time was a horrific number of people being killed in car accidents, a horrific number of people suffering life-debilitating injuries as a result of car accidents. And our society said, this is not good enough. Now, we're not going to get rid of cars, but we have to make car travel safer. So people came up with all these sorts of ideas and someone thought of, well, let's put seatbelts in cars. And initially it was poo-poo and people said, no, it'll slow us down, it'll make cars more expensive, they'll look ugly. But the general wisdom was we must make car travel safer. We are going to enshrine it in the law that seatbelts are mandatory. And I, for one, am so glad they did. Because not long after I got my driver's licence, I took the car, I didn't tell my dad, that was probably my bad move, I rolled the car. I completely wrote the car off. I remember when the car actually came to a stop and I undid my seatbelt to get out of the car because I thought it was going to blow up. I was falling on my head and I was trying to stand up and I didn't realise I actually flipped the car upside down. The car was a complete and utter write-off. I walked away with a broken fingernail. The message there is, when we change our way of thinking to reflect new ways of thinking, kinder ways of thinking, smarter ways of thinking, lives will be saved. In that instance, mine was. So now we can change our legislation to be kinder, safer, more compassionate to animals. And in 2003, we were offered this opportunity as the Code of Practice for Pig Farming was up for review. Working with Animals Australia and the Save Babe campaign, we're thinking, how can we get this message to the wider community that we can have input on how these animals were treated? And the Universe sent us an incredible shot in the arm by James Cromwell, happened to be in the country at the time. We just happened to be able to get in touch with James Cromwell, who just happened to want to do so much to help us for animals. And we got in touch with a major newspaper in Australia. They wanted to do a story, and we needed a pig for a photo shoot. I approached one of the children's farms, can we borrow a pig for a photo shoot? And they said, yeah, sure. It'll cost you $150. And I said, well, pigs,
I didn't have $150, but I did have a problem with children's farms in that the message that they send to children about why animals should be treated. You know, I don't know if any of you have ever been to a children's farm where they have a proliferation of baby animals. And if you ever asked yourself what happens to those baby animals when they're no longer cute and adorable, if you look at their menu that they serve, you sadly might find the answer. So I wasn't prepared to give them money. I did live in the country at the time. And I remember at the time I was really questioning my relationship with animals and my equestrian career. Although it was my dream to be a successful equestrian and have horses in my world, there was something that just didn't seem right with me. There was something tugging at me. And I was soon to find out what that was. So I had the property, so we got the pig for the photo shoot. The day before the photo shoot, we got this little pig from a pig farm. I remember my mother and I trying to wash him because he was covered in poop and he absolutely stunk. And pigs actually, this is a huge lesson in pigs. They have been my greatest teacher about who they really are. And when they get a bit upset, they actually fart, which is kind of awesome when you're in your house trying to clean them. And my mum and I, we cleaned Edgar so clean, an inch of his life. And Edgar actually didn't really like me to start with. He did love my little dog E.T., which was just such a boom because I remember my friend and I, we put Edgar in the pet carrier. We wheeled him down the street to where we were to meet the journalist and James to have this big photo shoot. We got into the front yard. We got Edgar out of his pet carrier. We put his harness on at home wisely because I've learned if you do things to pigs and they don't like it, they go into this someone's killing the pig routine. And it wasn't going to go well for the photo shoot. So we had his little harness on. We let him out. And we went into the backyard for the photo shoot. And I was leading Edgar around and my little dog E.T. was with me. And it looked really professional. You know, I'd had this pig less than 24 hours and I taught him to walk on a lead and the journalist was fascinated and James was fascinated saying, this is really cool, Pam. You know, you've taught this pig amazing things. You're such an amazing animal trainer. Oh, yes, it's pretty good. The photo shoot went so well. James had this idea that he was going to walk up the steps of Parliament House, Melbourne, in the company of Edgar Alan Pig and demand a better deal for pig on the steps of our Parliament. I thought, this is an awesome idea. Yes, we'll do this. We'll do it in a fortnight. And as we're walking out the door, I said to my friend, oh my God, I really now have to teach this pig to walk on a lead. So I started to go down to the local park every day with Edgar Allan Pig on one side and my little dog E.T. on the other. And this is where Edgar's mission was born. People came from everywhere to see Edgar and marvel at his unique brand of pigginess. They would rub him on his tummy, go, 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 and he'd flop on his side. And people say, he's just like my dog. He's so intelligent. He's smarter than my dog. He's cleaner than my dog. Oh my God, I eat these animals. And you could see light bulb moments going on in people's minds. And it just spoke so eloquently. Well, I could speak to people's heads. Edgar spoke so eloquently to their heart. And he reminded them that regardless of the form an animal is taken, everyone cherishes their life. Everyone wants to experience the sunshine, warmth and kindness. And that was where Edgar's mission was born. I realised when I won my last Garry-On in 2006 that I was riding around the arena. I was so incredibly proud of this achievement that I'd won, the highest accolade you could ever reach. And this sadness came over me because I realised this is the last time I'm ever going to do this. It's time now to get down from my high horse and truly championing the cause for animals. And that's what I've been doing ever since. We've just celebrated our 15-year anniversary of Edgar's mission. We have rescued thousands and thousands of farmed animals, and we have given hope to the ones that we've had to leave behind. Thank you. And that really does bring a tear to my eye, because when I think about those ones that I have had to leave behind, and of all of those ones, I think the saddest day of my life is the bobby calves. When you go to the bobby calf sale and you see these tiny little babies taken away from their mothers in the first few moments of their life, mothers who cherish their babies, babies who don't understand why the world is not kind to them, and they want to suck on anything they possibly can, and the way that people so disregard their feelings. My pledge to every one of those animals that I will tell your story, and I will keep telling your story until people understand that every one of us has the power to change the world simply by the choices that we make in our life. I've been so fortunate to rescue many, many bobby calves. people tend to forget about those mother cows that get left behind. And a few years ago, I actually befriended a lady who actually works in the dairy. And so don't write all farmers off as heartless and cruel because their go a different birthplace could be you or I. I truly believe that people don't set out to be cruel to animals. I think our system is very cruel to animals. People get caught up in the system. We need to deconstruct that system through the choices that we make. And this lady in the dairy industry, she told me how much she loved the cows. And I said, look, I would dearly love to be able to rescue a mama cow. It would be my way of saying I'm sorry for the choices that I made in my life that impacted upon you. And she contacted me one day about 2 mama cows who were going to be sent off to be slaughtered. And I had the opportunity to pick which one I could save. And I did. I picked both. So they both came to live at Edgar's Mission. There was 2. A beautiful Frisian cow I named Daphne and her friend Clarabelle. And they were pregnant. They got to give birth to their babies at Edgar's Mission. Daphne gave birth on Australia Day, and she was the most gentle. She was the biggest cow I've ever seen. And she was so gentle and kind. It just blew us away. She was so big. She could have, in an instant just squashed us with her foot, but she didn't. She was so trusting of us. And I remember the day she gave birth. It was Australia Day, so naturally her baby was going to be called Aussie. And we got the word that Clarabelle had gone down and she was starting to give birth to her calf. And we all raced out there because we wanted to be there present at the birth and, help mama and give her pats and take some photos. And as soon as we walked into that paddock, she stood up. She looked at us. She morphed into the Godzilla of cows and she said, no way, Jose, not today. You're not coming near my baby. I said, guys, quick, get the long lens. It's on Daphne's terms. And we all know why she didn't want us in that paddock. Even though she was at a sanctuary, she didn't trust us. Why was this time going to be any different from all the other times when her baby was taken away shortly after birth? So she got to keep her baby. And then little Clarabelle, she's so sweet. Little Jersey, with the big bug eyes, they're so beautiful. She wasn't due to give birth for several weeks, but we actually noticed that instead of being the first up for her food, she was actually quite slow and she was looking behind her all the time. And then I noticed one of her teats was very engorged and I thought, hello, something's going on here. So I followed her where she went, back into our forest. And there in the forest was a tiny little Jersey calf blinking back up at me. But she wasn't a newborn calf. She was several days old. It was Valentine's Day. So we called her Valentine. And we actually made a film, what we called Finding Valentine, because every day thereafter she would move that baby to a different part of the forest. Why? Because she didn't want her baby taken away as every one of her other babies had been taken away from her. Now, Clarabelle and her baby Valentine, who's 3 years old, they are inseparable. They're still together. Valentine is much bigger than her mama. They mutual groom together. They are everywhere together. The mother and child bond is so beautiful. And when people come to visit the animals at the sanctuary, they can see these bonds. We can tell the animals stories, encouraging people to decide for themselves how they think these animals should live. One thing that I'm very adamant at Edgar's Mission is that we will never tell people what to do or what not to do. I've got no authority to tell people what to do, and I'm not going to guarantee if I tell people what to do that they will do it. And after all, I don't want people to do things because I do them, because if you do that, you're going to end up with a terrible dress sense, eating way too much chocolate and very little sleep, and you don't want to do that. But the goodness of the human heart, if we can connect people with the goodness of the human heart, we are going to be on the trajectory to be the best that we can possibly ever be. And you might say to me, oh, Pam, some people are inherently bad. I truly don't believe that. And neither does a guy called Professor Jonathan Levi. In 2006, he took 80 Israeli and Palestinians and the youth. And these were people that were at conflict, that were fighting and killing each other. And he hooked them up to MEG machines and he examined their brains and he exposed them to images of people who had undergone trauma. Now, naturally, when the other person was identified as belonging to their own tribe, these people, empathy spiked. But what happened in the first few milliseconds when these people were exposed to trauma of other, regardless of who they were, empathy spiked in every single person, regardless of who the other was. That is my reason for hope, that we humans are programmed to care as a species. I see it every single day of the week when people contact us about animals who are suffering, animals in need, even farmers who see an innocent animal suffering and they want to save that animal. I want to keep those lifelines open. I want to encourage people to be the best that they can possibly ever be. We are presented with opportunities every single day through animals. The best within us seeks to protect them from suffering, yet the worst wants to profit from them suffering. Each and every single one of us shapes the world in which we live by the choices that we make. What we leave on the supermarket shelves and what we put in our trolleys represents the hope that the world can become a kinder place. Please never, ever lose sight of that. So I started my talk with a question, what if? I'm going to finish it with a question as well, and then I'll take some questions from you if you like. But my question to you now is, what if we could live happy and healthy lives without harming others? What compelling reason can we ever have for not doing so? Thank you, Adelaide. You're awesome. Anyone got any questions?
How's Swatini?
A lady has asked how Swatini. I didn't pay her to do that. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked that question since I've arrived at the festival. How is Swatini? For those of you who don't know, Swatini came to us late last week, a dear little lamb who had suffered horrifically at the hands of a predator. Her tail had been ripped off, her hock had been damaged, and she'd been bitten all around the head. She was in a terrible, pitiful state, but she was clinging on to life, hanging on the right side of living, and that's just what we promised her we will help her to do. She's at the vet at the moment. The report that came through this morning is that she's doing much better, thank you. She has a drain in her leg. And just so many people have come up and asked me about Swatini. I just thank you all so much that people have been coming up asking me about the animals who live at the sanctuary, because you make it possible. The fact that you care about these animals, that you're sharing the stories with your family and friends on Facebook, you are making these animals seen. You are showing them as individuals, and that is what's going to touch people. That is going to remind people that every single life matters, and that we have the power to change it. So thank you so much for Swatini's thoughts, and I'll pass it on to her when I get back home. And I can't wait to give her a hug from all of you here today in Adelaide. Any other questions? Thank you all so very much. Please come over and see me before I head off home. Thank you, Adelaide.